starting off on a very, very interesting topic now. The topic is how do we collaborate more effectively, right? If we rewind about 15, 20 years from now, the conversations used to be very, very different. Now, suddenly after a decade, technology and marketing are on the same platform and will need to collaborate, communicate, and talk a lot more, right? So, so I'm going to move over to my panelists here. I think first question I want to talk about is to Hivanshu and Mayank, right? On what do you think, how do you develop a common language, right? Because if you think about the journey of these two verticals, these two spaces, the way we have evolved in terms of talking, what kind of languages we have spoken is very, very different, right? How do you develop a common language across these two to be able to build a collaborative partnership?
Okay, I'll go first. Okay. Hello, everyone. Before I straight away jump into that answer or into that question and give you the answer, I think I'll just set some a context here in terms of as an enabler, the IT or the people responsible for the technology play a very, very critical role. From a day-to-day interaction, from a day-to-day customer facing, from a day-to-day dealing with the pulse of the system, that's where people like us sitting on the panel play an important or an okay role. However, the fundamental question that arises, and I'm going to quote this conversation between the cat and Alice in Wonderland. I think Cheshire or something was the name of the cat, if anyone remembers. Does anyone remember? Nobody remembers, okay. Google, I think it was Cheshire. So Alice says, I want to go in a particular direction, to whatever memory serves me, right? So the cat asks, where is it that you want to go? So the answer Alice gives is, doesn't matter. So then this cat says, if it doesn't matter where you want to go, take any path, it will lead you there. So the reason I'm quoting is because today one of the more fundamental common languages is to have that common objective, that common goal, which is aligned between both the stakeholders or all other stakeholders also. Unless until there is not a synergy, not a common KPI between the two ecosystems, that common language cannot form. Diving down straight away to the answer, yes, I think it's important to form that common language. It is important that the whole metrics are shared, and that's how they operate.
I think just adding on to what Hivanshu just mentioned, let's go back to the little bit of fundamentals, how we start learning about any particular aspect. So when we started our education, we learned either Hindi, English, or any particular language, which was the native language for us. And that's where, with any person interacting with us, we were able to exchange ideas, communicate to whatever extent. Prior to that, it was the sign language, right, which kids actually use, the infants use very effectively. So if the marketing and the tech teams, they need to collaborate, having a common or a shared language is extremely necessary. This is something that has been done, between the business and the tech teams, for now decades. But perhaps marketing is now kind of, joining that stream where technology is getting much more ingrained in the overall ecosystem. Earlier it was more of a traditional marketing, moved to digital marketing, and speaking with all the marketeers around me, learned a few more terms that, are coming up in the marketing space. But, as it were, I was not able to connect with all of those terms because something that I've not been exposed to. But the basics that I deal with our marketing team, or my team interacts with the marketing team, we understand now each other's vocabulary to a certain extent, which actually helps us in explaining our point of view better, understanding what is the ask from the marketing or the business teams better, and then try to find a common solution or a common path on which both of us can work, or walk hand in hand. So for collaboration to exist, not just on paper, but in real action, it is absolutely essential that both the teams really understand, what the other team is trying to put forth, and which is where the language, as one of those forms becomes extremely necessary. So, it won't be surprising that in times to come we will find marketing for tech 101, which is for the technology team, and vice versa, tech for marketing 101 being, used as that handout to get a conversation going. And that perhaps would actually improve upon the level of collaboration that we currently see, because it is only expected to increase over a period of time.
Yeah, very interesting point actually. And this is, I think, more so for from the point of view of internal teams, internal tech teams interacting with each other, right? And I think Pooja, at this point, I'll try to bring you in. You come from an industry which is known for traditional marketing. If you go a decade before being in appliances and consumer durables, so how has that shift been? Maybe you can shed some light on the transition journey, because a lot of which you're doing now is tech enabled, and we were talking about it on how are we bringing tech into the entire marketing space. So how has that journey been, and how have we enabled something I think everybody will be interested to know?
Thank you for the lovely question. I was reflecting when you were just asking this question. It does not come across as obvious, but durables, consumer durables, were probably one of the first industries to realize the power of tech and the power of data for two reasons. One, of course, as a product forward, we obviously are able to, we have a lot better connection with technology, right? As a space, not necessarily about marketing or not necessarily about communication, but tech is something that we live in day out from a product construction perspective. When this whole tide started to turn around using tech for marketing, personalization, customization of products, so on and so forth, after telecom, we were probably the first industry to realize that we sit with a huge amount of 1P data by virtue of the products we deal in. Average life cycle of a product that is a consumer durable is about 7 years. Beyond 2 years, nobody offers warranty, which means you continuously need to interact with people for annual marketing, annual maintenance, you need to talk about spares, there's a service center interface that all consumer durable companies have, and that is a very, very rich repository of 1P data. So beyond telecom, if there are companies that have a vast repository of 1P data to be used, it's actually durables. Once that got realized, I think that was the moment when the tide started to shift. So if you were to notice even today, and Nikhil and I were having this conversation in the backside, that even compared to an FMCG, the bigger leaps in technology marketing or marrying marketing with technology will happen actually in mobile and then subsequently in durables, because we realize the power of having that data, holding on to that consumer for so many years, and then continuing to hold on to him or her when she enters the decision journey once again. Plus, given the fact that most companies operate with a huge portfolio of products, we operate with a concept called consumer lifetime value, which is basically I've acquired you once, now I have to keep upselling you. It's also a very, very clean tech term. Most SaaS operators here will speak about that. So I think that's been a very interesting journey. It's also been a massively learning journey for all of us who've also worked in the FMCG space and have grown up really fantasizing about lovely ad commercials and beautiful marketing campaigns in that sense. But I think as long as you are open to accepting the fact that the ecosystem has evolved, the consumer expectation has evolved, I think it does not stay that tough, I guess.
Sure. You spoke about a very interesting point in terms of adoption of what all new technologies that come in, and I think Nikhil is the right person to come in now. Nikhil, you've been on both sides of the table, right? As a marketer and as a service provider to enable MarTech. So how do you see that conversation evolving? Because to be able to make companies understand the importance of using tech, right? One of the examples we were talking about is that you create a commercial and then you realize that none of your metrics have moved, right? So that's a post-mortem. You can't do anything with a dead body, right? How do you enable that conversation and make people understand the importance of using technology into marketing?
A great question. I think, how do you look at the topic marketing and technology, right? I think the first time Mark Zuckerberg decided to open Facebook for advertising, you were using technology for advertising. And we can go back. The first time you guys were doing out of home, and the out of home vendor decided to put that in a PPT format and send you all the outdoor hoardings that you've taken and said, oh, now I can see all, maybe that was tech. I think how you look at simplistically marketing and technology coming together has been done forever. I remember 10 years back, or probably more actually, I'm sorry, sometimes forget, or probably 12 years back in my CPG days, social was becoming really big. And everybody, all brands wanted to be on social, and we want to understand how social is done. Clearly, we were translating our old age acumen of traditional marketing into social, which had its merit of, actually converting probably English into Punjabi and then trying to speak it in Italian, right? So I think we acquired an agency which were predominantly run by the youngest guys who were born in the tech era, who were born in the mobile era, and they were able to understand social better. When you move on, right, I mean, if you move generations from there, a decade from now, and if I have to quote the most recent example of marketing and technology, I think in the 2 years of COVID, including all of us on this dais and people everywhere on the audience side, all of us became more educated on tech. And I'll give you simple reasons. You had to have a Wi-Fi at home. Okay, so you needed to understand what speed means. Okay, just that's technology for you. Because your boss would tell you, man, like, you're going to be here for a while, okay? So you better get a better connection. Now, what does that mean? Now, it's got nothing to do with marketing, but it's got everything to do with marketing, because then consumers had to be reached in a separate way. How do you reach those consumers? What is your targeting that you can build? Now, how that targeting is again a function of tech. Marketing has always, function of marketing is to drive consumer sentiment with the right messaging and drive brand favorability. That hopefully translates into brand intent to purchase and eventually the purchase. Now, the vehicle could be offline for a long period of time, still continues to be, it's a large part of your marketing. But technology has enabled that vehicle to move faster into the consumer's houses, whether it's through mobile, whether it's through their connected televisions today, and you were talking about what are the new tech. I think in many years in your media silos of planning, something new comes up. And then it's a force so big that you have to pay attention to it. And I believe two trends that I remember in the last 3 to 5 years, which are really taking a part of your media planning, is obviously connected televisions and maybe influencer marketing. I'll leave the latter because I don't have a point of view or part to play in it. But surely on connected televisions, you can understand that, imagine the most traditional medium, the most powerful form of medium called TV advertising, can now be translated into real-time targeting, digital metrics of where you can put your ad, track it down to the users probably who saw that ad, track it down to their LTV of where did they like their ad? I mean, yes, you can do a BLS, which is our favorite tool of all of marketers, and then pat ourselves on the back for how good the metrics were. Or you could actually look at the real consumer engagement. Did he end up at your website? Did he buy the product that he wanted to buy? Did he install your app? Did he book a test drive? Did he buy the Malabar Gold? Did he book your medicine or any of the panelists that are on the table? And tech can do that for you in a more transparent way, in a more giving the power, democratizing the power of access to the marketers. And I think technology today, if you look at it, is in every part of where marketing channels used to be. Outdoor is digital out of home. Digital is digital, and digital has many parts to it now and many legs to it. It is digital and driven by technology. And then TV has also become connected television now. Newspapers still get circulated, but then there are enough power of online news portals and online applications which are going online first. Tech's everywhere, man. I think it's
a very interesting point actually, because so there are so many options available, right, to marketers. You have unified data solutions, you have all kind of marketing solutions with respect to digital you spoke about. You also have content management, you have all sorts of enterprise solutions available. So the next question, and I want Nikhil to answer as a service provider, and I'd request the other panelists to also put in their views from how the decision-making process will be. how does a marketer choose what solution works well? Because this is a collaborative effort internally between the tech and the marketing teams, right? The IT team will have a say on this, on what integrates better within the company system, digital ecosystem. The marketers will want a particular service to be developed or to run their campaigns, to run all of their strategies. So how do these two entities come together, choose the right set of capabilities? Because there's a whole world out there in terms of enterprise solutions, right? So I think that's...
No, I think great question. I think a few days back I was asked this question that who is the decision maker when it comes to making a decision? Is it the chief information officer? Is it the chief marketing officer? And my answer, I'm repeating it for the benefit of everyone who was not there, is that one shoe fits all is not the answer actually. Because if your purpose of using a MarTech stack is media optimization, probably the CMO is a more powerful person on that conversation and leading that conversation. If the objective is to do media optimizations, reduce the media, create media savings, blow that into the next year. More important, media. How do we do more in the same cost? Okay. If it's a tech-enabled solution where you're talking about creating a CDP, you want to own the first-party data, you want to create a layer which is enabled, safe, secure, and usable by your organization without stepping on the data laws of that particular country. Probably you will need a chief information officer to be a part of that or a chief technical officer to be a part of that. So it is a collaborative effort, and which is why it's called MarTech. But I think if you look at today as well, there are so many, like you said, there's a content solution providing ecosystem, there is a media optimization providing solution, there's an audience manager. Again, they are not talking to each other, right? There are very few ecosystems that are talking to each other, but again, is that also the requirement of the marketing need? You want it, but is it really that you want? Because I think your priorities changed as organizations, your priorities change as marketers, and at the heart of it, I think, is the consumer. And I think somewhere the answer lies there as well, that how can I get to my consumer in the best way possible, retain and obviously acquire that consumer at the least cost that I can, quality of that audience, not compromising the least cost, and then making sure it is the right audience eventually, and then keep engaging with him. And technology plays a role in all parts of it, from exposure to acquisition, retention, and remarketing. So I think, can one service provider do it all? Sure. I mean, everybody is striving for it. But would you be comfortable giving the power of your entire customer life cycle in one ecosystem? And it's a generic question I'll leave to the panel. Because then, are you going to put all your eggs in one basket? And are you comfortable doing that? Because for the longest time, we were a single skewed spending ecosystem where marketers like Pooja or Mayank or, Devanshu are saying, I'm sure there's a better way of getting to this customer, man, because if you are the judge, jury, and audience, then I have no play in it. So this is an open thought process.
And maybe Devanshu can put light on how does this transformation exercise that you are, maybe you can talk about some examples of some transformation journeys that you are creating at Oberoi.
Yeah, so I was actually thinking about this one story when Nikhil was speaking, and this is very interesting. So I'm not going to quote the names and everything, but there was this one case I remember. So in the hotel industry, we have something called as a profile. Now, profile could be made on a PMS, or it could be made on any of the systems that are available. Now, different hotel companies have different systems. One of the most common ones is called Opera. We operate on Opera. So by virtue of ensuring that there is sustenance to the service that is being provided, every customer, every guest is recognized by a profile. So if you have visited, I would know what you like, don't like, and stuff like that. Excuse me. Now, funnily, there is this one loyalist of the brand who was a hardcore non-vegetarian. He was not allergic to shellfish. He was not really, he was not a fundamentalist or had any religious thoughts. He could eat anything which could walk. However, whenever he would enter our prime properties, he would be served some fruit basket, some Jain thali meal, and he was stunned. And you know, the the various service quality executives would come and with pride and say that, listen, you know, we understand you so well that before you even entered, we realized what your dietary habits are and we've given you something which is suitable to your needs. And one fine day, and some of the market research activities that I was doing for launching a new product, I met this gentleman, and very sweet and a loyalist, so he never raised it also, so he was fine. So we realized that he was, so again the same thing happened. I was sitting in Belvedere, sorry, I was sitting in 360 in New Delhi, and you know, the F&B head there comes and says that, sir, is it fruit platter for you again? And he says, no, I'm going to do the buffet, and he was eating every meat available. And I happened to ask him what happened then. So turns out in the profile, at one fine day, he must have entered, and it must be a Navratra or something, I don't know, and the person there made a noting in his profile maintained on the PMS that he's not eaten any meat. So by default, any place he would enter and we would recognize, I guess, and that's the USP of the brand, being a hardcore non-vegetarian, he would be given this. So why I thought I'll bring this example to the table, and of course we did the needful, we made the corrections, etc. But you know, the reason is that what is being perceived and what is actually happening on the floor, unless and until that hand is not shaked, the outcome cannot be given. Another example on a very similar day-to-day failure that I realized in one of the hotel chains, there was a gentleman who entered and he said that, listen, I don't like these plasticky razors, right? So you have those use and throw razors whenever you go to any hotel. So he requested for some fancy Gillette or something he must have asked for. So again, the same thing happened. That entry got made into a system that this guest doesn't use the plasticky, the use and throw razor, but needs a very high-end, a special expensive razor to be placed. So the hotel's team, they started every time he would check in, and he was a very regular guest, right? So he would be checking in at least 4 times a month. So in the end of the month or end of the quarter, he had some 12 those same razors available, which he said was absolutely not needed, because there was this one time that he was not carrying his razor and he requested, but that's how the profile was made. So yeah, so I think from a custodian perspective, from a revenue metric perspective, I think the larger question being, I think CMO and the sales head have their skin in the game. They are somebody who needs to take the ball rolling. It is very, very important, very, very critical that they have a very critical stake at the game. But then, will a CIO or a CISO or a CTO should be kept away from it? In my opinion, the answer is no. Today, when we would end up getting, let's say, a new social media agency for us, what is the typical parameters? I think there are a lot of marketers sitting here. At least I would not be comfortable in just picking and choosing one agency and saying, let's just go with it. Because, you know, it is a very subjective opinion. You might like white, I might like black. Are you good, am I bad? No, I don't know. So typically, in any environment, we would try to put a process to it. The process would say that out of all the pitches that were made, which was the best pitch closest to the brand? Maybe there could be a step that who understood the best in terms of the brief, how strong the teams were, and you devise a rating scale and then you come to a logical conclusion. Similarly, comprising a panel, having people from whether it's IT, whether it's marketing, whether it's operations, especially in our sector, it is important that they all understand the core objective, which I mentioned in your first question, of a common language, and they work together towards that KPI.
Yeah. And I think my next question is to Mayank, and I think almost everybody, whether from in this room, whether from technology side or from the marketing side, has sat in a room, done this conversation once, is on the data security side, right? A lot of our internal systems, when we talk about enterprise solutions, those integrations put a huge risk on your internal data systems, right? How does that balance come out to be? Because as a marketer, I want access to almost every data point for the consumer. that is available in the system. As a CIO, I'm sure you would want to put governance on each and everything that I'm asking for. How do you put that conversation around? Like that's got to be something that almost everybody has gone through in their life at least once.
I think at least once would be possibly an understatement. So I think we've all kind of experienced this, that whenever there is an opportunity, let's collect every possible information about that individual, about that organization, about your customer, whatever is possible, because we do not know when some of that information would come in handy, right? The examples that Devanshu just quoted are perhaps just adding more information to that profile, but being in that hospitality industry, I think this is a must, and that really makes the experience very unique, very personalized for those customers, right? But how do we, ensure that we are not really crossing those boundaries, that, we should not be capturing, and more importantly, if we've captured, we're not really using it in a manner that is not ethical. So I've been in the financial services, more specifically on the insurance side, and as a part of the life insurance underwriting, you want to know just about everything about that individual to assess what is the, the chance that the person would survive the policy term, and those policy terms could be 20 years, 30 years, even more, right? So at that time, the underwriters wanted everything under the sun, their family, their parents, their grandparents, anything. How would they use it? Is essentially to kind of determine the life expectancy of that individual. So at that time, we used to wonder, what is that we are really collecting and using this information for? Because once that is done, the current underwriting, that policy has been issued, what are we really doing with that information? But it has created an onus on the technology side to now store this data, maintain it, and maintain it in a manner that it's safely kept away, because it's a hell lot of PII that is, there in those systems. So that risk, always remained, and, finally we used to give in to whatever the business was asking for, hoping that, they perhaps understand and know what they're, asking for, and maybe there is going to be some use. And I think that kind of, is a trend that has been experienced in other industries as well. Somewhere, I think the industry itself helps in drawing that line. In the healthcare side, I think whatever is collected about the patient's health information, about the allergies or anything which is related to the medical history is extremely sensitive, but that's required. It is gathered, people share it voluntarily, but the risk still remains. Now, when you kind of look at using the information that has been collected, not weaponized, but when you're kind of looking at monetizing that information, I think that's where it's important that we really consider or reconsider the boundaries that we might be overstepping on. And I think perhaps, the recent bill that has come in on the DPDP Act, I think is perhaps giving that nudge, to us as an industry, all of us as consumers and the entire country, that the data that is available of every citizen, is their personal property, and we need to be cognizant about how do we actually use this information. So before actually it becomes a law and gets enforced, I think it is causing a lot of rethink within the organizations, and across the industries. What do we need to collect this information for? Earlier, that was not really a point of discussion as much. I mean, it will happen theoretically, but it would kind of die down its natural death, and finally everybody will say, okay, whatever is asked for, let's collect, right? But now, with this act coming into play, I think the onus is increasing. But I think prior to that also, all of us are consumers of some kind of services, some kinds of goods across the entire economy, right? So if we need to be mindful, we need to place ourselves in that customer's shoes whenever we are collecting that information. Why do I need this information? What am I really going to do with it? Is it absolutely necessary for me to have it? And I know all the marketers here would be really, hating me for this, but I think the onus is on all of us to really determine where do we draw that line. Some of the industries, of course, will have more stringent guidelines because of the regulations or the ministries that they'll be a part of. But I think the first change really comes in from us thinking, placing ourselves in the place of the customers and figuring out, is this something that I really need to store about, that existing or a potential customer?
I think, can I just chime in here? Sorry.
Yeah, I actually had a follow-up. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm going to take it. I saw some lazy faces in the backside. So I thought I'll just add up a quick thing to cheer the crowd up with your permission.
Sure,
So, can I have a show of hands of those people who have seen this movie Jab We Met? Only 6, 7? Oh, majority of the hall.
Also on the
Okay.
stage.
Oh, also on the stage. Okay. So, okay, good. At least 90% audience has seen. Okay, does this ring a bell? नहीं खाने मुझे गन्ने. ये लड़के मुझे गन्ने खिला रहे हैं, नहीं खाने मुझे गन्ने. Does it? Does it? No, actually, in the last 5 odd minutes, whatever him and me spoke was the same thing. पहले वो that guest example that I gave, कि उसको कह रहा है कि मूली खीरा टमाटर खा लो, वो कह रहा है नहीं खाना मुझे मूली खीरा टमाटर. And now he's saying that CIS कहता है मैं decide कर लूँ, marketing कहता है मैं decide कर लूँ. So I just thought I'll just pep up the
And I
audience.
think this point I think brings to us a very important question, right? So Pooja is a brand owner, right? You have Devanshu mentioned that हम तो shaving का भी data इकट्ठा कर रहे हैं उसका. and all of
ऐसे
those
कहते हैं
things, right?
opt-in और opt-out data, हाँ? मतलब
No,
just FYI.
but
तुमने तो
we
collect
live
कर
in a-
लिया, but उसने दिया नहीं. अभी
Yeah,
तो
but we live in a world where our data is getting collected, right? Whether we know or not. A lot of our phone is hearing us and someone's watching us and all of those things are happening.
Don't yaar. Come on, you're scaring people. That's not technology at all. Nobody is hearing you guys.
His phone is listening to you, him as well.
Not that
Okay,
provider.
okay. The point I'm making is this, that as a brand owner, right, you have to, to a technology service provider, right, how do you draw those lines of what you want to do with that information, right? Because there is just no limit to what you can do with respect to hyper personalization and all the campaigns you can do. How do you make that decision of drawing the line and then explain it to the technology partner, right? And I'm sure Nikhil will also have a viewpoint on this, being on the other side. But as a brand owner, I would want that perspective from you.
I think, one, I have the privilege of working in industries where data is not incredibly sensitive, like fintech or healthcare, for example. Of course, there's data and personal data, and it's got its own limitations that one should live with or one should want to use. But the data that we end up collecting or we end up needing is not incredibly sensitive in terms of your household income or financial history or medical history or so on and so forth. Having said that, there is still obviously a lot of data which needs to be collected, processed, used, etc. And I have the privilege of being both the chief data officer for the company as well as the marketing officer. And we have a very simple philosophy which I believe can be implemented everywhere, even if you do not have the chief data officer hat on your head. Every time there is a data request that comes in, or every time that I'm meeting a tech partner, and we're trying to identify what kind of data needs to be collected, there's one very simple question everybody needs to answer. What is the business impact of not having this data? So I think prima facie, the idea is to say, whenever you've come with a request, if you want to collect something, there's got to be a reason. We don't need you to justify that reason. But the question is, a lot of times when we are formulating our plans, making our strategies, thinking about information, there is this inherent greed. And like he mentioned, collect kar lo, kya pata kab use aa jaye. Protect karo, maintain karo, kal use aayega, parson use aayega, pata nahi, but let's just keep it. I think we have this very strong policy, and I think this is something that is probably now increasingly getting used everywhere else also, which is to say, collect kar lo, mat karo, whatever. Every time you want to retrieve it and use it, you first have to showcase what is the business impact of not having it. So clearly there is impact of having it, but what if it's not given to you? What happens then? Is there a workaround possible? Is there a significant
And there's a
immediate
cost of having
short-
that data.
Of course, there's a cost
Huge
of having
cost.
the data, huge cost, and which is why it's super important to continuously keep asking that question of what is the cost of not having that or not using that. And I think what tech does really beautifully with marketing is actually help us answer that question. Because, and remember we were having that conversation around CTV just before this panel, I think this whole idea is to really say that you have to define what is this outcome that you are chasing eventually. As clearly, as crystallizingly that you end up delivering it, and as transparently you are able to sort of define it for everybody who's involved in the process. Drawing steps from that backwards, keeping all the constraints in mind, regulations in mind, etc., I think makes it a very, very easy process. It gives you a common language, it gives you choices, it gives you impact of not having what you really want.
Yeah, and I think a lot of our job as marketers now is also to say no to things,
Yes.
right? And that's a very important element of our jobs. And I think I was talking to Mayank before that at Narayana, we are into healthcare, right? So a large part of sensitive information and a lot of information is available. How do you bring empathy onto that? How do you bring context and relevance? So a large part of our conversations within revolves around, okay, we don't want to do this. This is something which is unwarranted. And one of the basic principles we achieve is that, is there an action I am deriving from a customer? If the answer is no, then I don't want to send that message. So I think that kind of resonates with almost everyone here. And I think Nikhil will bring in the other part of the side.
I think I'm on the same part of the side actually, not the other side, because at the end of the day, I think, like me and Pooja were laughing, that there is no marketing done for the purpose of you are a great marketer, first fundamentally, okay? I didn't make an ad because I really like making ads, and then we all enjoyed the ad. Then we said, let's shove it down everybody's throat. I think that fact has to be well understood. She will want to target the most relevant person. She's not wrong in her role to be targeting the most relevant person. And that we were talking about data. He would want to collect the most relevant data about that consumer, because one part of his entire experience is understanding the customer, right? One part of her journey is understanding and targeting the right consumer. So obviously the relevance of data always holds, and you would want to target the right consumer. But it's your marketing technology providers which have to draw the line for you. Sometimes, you know, you hear so many things. I was laughing, we were laughing that somebody was telling me that, oh, I can target females on connected TV. Really? How? It's a TV, man. Like, I don't know if your TV has cameras now who can target females, but yeah, I'm sure. Because everybody is having the most greatest targeting which they want to sell to Pooja, and then Pooja has to invest all her budget and move it out from whatever she's doing, because you have got the best targeting. And I think that's fine, you know, at the end of the day, not stepping on anyone's toes, but this is where knowledge of marketing and technology comes in. Nobody is expecting all you marketers to be the best technology understanding people. But as chief decision makers, it's your fundamental understanding of, one, what we should say no to. Two, at the behest of we getting the most best outcome, where do we draw the line? Yeah. Is it ethical? Is it what we want to do? What kind of data do we want to collect? And I think it's, like I said, any marketing that is done is done for the purpose of driving your brand success. Hence, marketing exists. Technology is the vehicle to bring that success. Many years back, many technologies didn't exist to bring you that success. So you're relying on certain market shares, market scores, market indexes. Today, you can track the success of your marketing real time. You can actually evaluate whatever you're doing through technology real time. And that brings neutrality to the discussion, right? Because at a certain point of time, the dependency was so high, and the turnaround time for marketing investment to an outcome was probably 90 days, or even more for that matter point of time, even an year. Oh, we did this, and next year our market shares have increased. So we must have done great, but today you have the relevance. Yeah, the season is gone, and today you have the relevance of pulling out of, some brands pulling out of the whole cricket ecosystem. Imagine two most important events of the Indian ecosystem, Big Boss and IPL. One at the beginning, one at the end. And probably your marketing budgets used to get split like that. No longer, right? And if you all saw this year, it was a phenomenal celebration of the festive season, Indian World Cup, India doing really well. Let's celebrate that, except the end. Celebrate that too. But everything else, the whole industry is moving. If you look at the overall ecosystem, it's still growing. So I think that's where technology, understanding of technology and marketing has to come, shake hands, trust each other that you will have the right targeting.
Right. And I think we have had a good 40 minutes of discussion. I'd love to have a couple of questions from the audience. Before that, a quick 30-second from each of you on what are one or two things that you recommend for this partnership to work well between the tech and the marketing?
I think depending on the lifestyle, depending on the ecosystem of a company, it is very important that they sit down together and develop a roadmap together. We talk about one view of a customer, we talk about implementing CDPs, we talk about various other these jargons in today's time, but unless until, you know, I've seen, sorry, I'm going to take slightly longer than 30 seconds. I've seen this one particular organization having Salesforce implemented, and I spoke to the marketing team there, and they gave me some spiel in terms of how Salesforce is so beautiful and this and that. And I asked a couple of questions in terms of the integration and, you know, what are the outcomes other than sending emailers that Salesforce was absolutely doing nothing for them. And my question was that, you know, you spent X crores of rupees for that whole implementation. Agar email hi bhejna tha, to, you know, MailChimp leke, you could have sent that in a couple of thousands or lakhs. So I think, to me, the core pinpointing the answer is getting into that common room, which again, I've been saying from the last few minutes, having a common objective, common goal, and walk that road together. One link slips, the ecosystem falls.
Mayank?
I think Nivanshu has summed it up beautifully. Probably just adding one other dimension to it, understanding each other, and perhaps it goes back to the first question that you had, Rahul, on understanding that or creating that common language which both the teams can understand to really exchange their ideas, understand each other's pain points, and then create that shared roadmap. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's cup of tea is not your cup of tea. Some teas are there to make you go to sleep. Some teas are to wake you up, right? You realize which tea you want to have. So I think understanding that what is the purpose of your marketing and which technology is solving that, and is your current ecosystem ready to adopt that technology, which is your brand, the country of origin, and the laws that prevail around that country to enable that technology for your brand to gain success by enabling that technology. Great example of Salesforce, because it's one of the most valued companies in the world. But probably in this particular case, if that was the purpose of execution, could have done it with MailChimp.
I think for me, it's going to be 3, not 2. First one is going to be very, very clearly defined picture of success. What is it that you really want to achieve out of this partnership, this activity, campaign, whatever you're doing? Second is ask lots of questions. Nikhil just spoke about marketers needing to have a knowledge of technology. One doesn't really need to understand tech stack for that. You just need to ask 5 questions, and then you will get logical answers, and you'll know whether you're on the right track or not. And last but not the least, be really open to hearing genuine, real answers of the questions that you are asking. Don't expect to hear what your preconceived notion is. As long as you are open to really listening back, look, this is not making sense, it's bullshit, I think the partnership will definitely be able to work.
Understand, not to respond.
Absolutely.
So I think co-creating, first having clear objectives of what we want to do, co-creating the roadmap, and speaking to each other well. I'm going to add one more, which is, I think very important is having some, co-own some of the KPIs, right? Because the KPIs are very different for tech and for marketing. So what could work well is how do we co-own some of the things in terms of metrics. So yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to open the floor now for questions. Yes, sir.
Can someone give a mic?
I'll give you mine.
Hi panelists, this is Priyan from Alliance, and I was keenly listening to what Nikhil sir said about CTVs. We come from the same media planning background. So I've been listening about hyper-personalization, and stuff, what you need to do for your clients since morning, and I've been waiting to ask this question. Where does this personalization start and where does it end? So I'll tell you the very simple question that we encountered today is that there is a broad medium like a television newspaper, which doesn't have any personalization at all. Then we have digital, which can offer you endless, limitless personalization. But now what happens is when we go to a prospective client or even existing client, they say that if I can go to the last mile, let me just skip the overall border and just straight go to last mile. But then there are things like even a Airbnb, which realize that, okay, I've done enough personalization, I need to do a brand building. So then my question to the panel is, where does this personalization start and where does it end? So do we all go completely personalized levels, or we have to do something at an overarching level to, create a pool of people who might go down the funnel to my consideration or the, my purchasing set? purchase.
I'll quickly sort of take my nuggets, and I think there are marketers who will answer their nugget. But I think I belong to an organization which is largely doing a performance, and we're a publicly listed company, so a large part of our business is performance. And if the end objective is performance, then do performance. You don't need to, and there's a fairly large business. If you combine the overall dollars spent on performance globally, it is far bigger than what's put on brand all put together. So performance marketing is big, right? So there is no need for explanation on that. But on your question on personalization, again, we discussed a lot about where do you stop, right? I mean, you can create the most personalized ad, but is the user comfortable with that, right? One of the examples that Devanshu shared was the best personalized example of a CRM really executing personalization to the T, but only later realizing that at the end of it, we are all human and we make mistakes, right? The guy is a lover of non-veg. He was eating vegetarian, but because he liked Oberoi so much, he loved the veg as well. But I think somewhere it's the discretion of the marketers, one on how much deep they want to go. It's their right to go to the best customer. But as technology partners, it's also our rightful need to serve the right targeting parameters to them. At the end of the day, we need to know where to draw the line, right? Just because, he mentioned, I'm bringing it up, sorry, because you mentioned it. I've gone to publisher-led companies who talk about appographic targeting, and I sometimes scratch my head, and I think very similar to how you can do CTV targeting with female, that if you are a single app on the mobile, how do you have appographic targeting, man? Unless you are reading into all the other apps as a single app sitting on my mobile. Now, I can offer you that personalized targeting, but technically and ethically, that's not the right thing for you to be reading into my mobile other applications. You have the right to decide where do you stop and what do you put in front. And then obviously, marketers have to decide that.
I think
I
a
will
lot
answer
of it
that
also
slight-
has to be what your company ethos are, right? What you want to do, where you want to draw the line. I think we discussed it during the panel also that there is just no end to it, to answer your question. It doesn't end, it doesn't start. You create those boundaries with the help of what you want to do within the company.
I was about to say the same thing, that in my opinion, I'll answer this differently. Personalization it's a DNA of the organization. The organization that I'm currently a part of, there is absolutely no stopping. You are still talking about the front funnel or the front bucket, which is of acquiring a new customer. I'm saying even from a servicing perspective, there is no limit to the kind of bespoke experiences or personalization that we can go to. And why should you? Because, the question is, will I respond better if I'm called Devanshu out of 100 people standing together? Or will I respond better if I would be called a sir better? In my case, I would be happy to be recognized by my name. That will really evoke me to turn around and see who that person has called me. And by that simple logic, I think there is absolutely no limit to personalization.
Great. Any more questions?
Anybody else with a question? I have the mic here with me.
Pooja, you want a point of view?
There's one there.
Just saying, I don't know.
I'll come to you.
On having no questions.
No, that too. And the one before that.
Okay, we have a question.
Hey, just taking the point on performance further. So as now Meta and Google are coming up with more algorithms, which they're just saying that you just put in some data and we'll take care of everything from a personalization and generation of content point of view. Where do you see this future in the control of individual companies or marketers in the whole story?
Marketers, do you want to take that question?
You've been an ex-marketer, why don't you start?
It's been a while.
So honestly speaking, and I deliberately did not respond to the previous question as well, simply because I think it is important for us, all of us as marketers and as people who operate in this ecosystem, to take a step back and understand what personalization really means. I don't think personalization starts or stops at calling Devanshu by his name, for example, which is what a lot of us tend to believe personalization really is about. Personalization is really about identifying exactly what makes you tick, and not all 5 of us might not need 5 different things to make us tick. And all of us, end of the day, are birds. We can be flocked together. There can be cohorts. There are groups, right, that appeal to us. And very recently, some cosmetic companies done a very beautiful thing, which basically is around making your own shade of foundation, right? And the biggest insight really was that most foundation that cosmetic brands are selling in India are not really developed with Indian skin tones in mind. They are all developed for Caucasian skin, and they don't make sense for us. And they developed a simple technology of color mixing with the base or whatever at their stores. It was like a dispensing machine. You can just make your own foundation, mix and match your shade, and find your own color. Now that was hyper-personalization, despite the fact that the machine did not call me out by my name, right? I think the point really is to be able to exactly identify what is it that you want to deliver. And as long as that is clear, I think you will really know where to draw the line on personalization, how to use all of these tech enablement partners to deliver the personalization that you want. And clearly there's opportunity to do personalization at scale, which is what most marketers will start moving towards very soon, simply because hyper-personalization running behind every single consumer at the top of the funnel is an impossibility. And we cannot ignore top of the funnel given the rise of competitive brands across every single segment that we operate in. And I think that's where my point of view is.
Superb. Anyone else from a marketing lens on Facebook and Meta?
I think, okay.
There's one more question.
Please, we
Mike?
can. Yes, sir. We have time, we can.
So since we have a great blend of marketing gurus from every industry here, if I could say, ask a basic question that, would you put a bigger budget to MarTech in the client acquisition versus client retention sphere? Would there be any kind of percentage mix that each of you could offer so that we have an idea that this is what we should be looking at?
Want to take that? So I don't know about Guru, but yeah, definitely I'm a kid on the block for sure. But I would broadly say that from a retention perspective, or so when I started this, I started with the same premise that we should all know where we are headed to, because if we don't know where we are headed to, we'll anyways reach somewhere, right? So what's the point? But if in that room we sit down and we say that, listen, these are the 5 factors, and by doing them, this is how we will enhance either the retention or the performance or the acquisition, whatever. If those things are aligned, that's where the cost budgeting comes in. And why I picked up the mic for this, for your question, is because on numerous occasions when as a marketer or as a techno-commercial person I've done those kind of activities, the finance head treats this between a capex and an opex, what's the distinguishing? And basis on that, if there is something that you want to start at the beginning of the year, that comes in your Jan, Feb, March budgeting activity, and then you build on something from an opex perspective throughout the year. To how the marketing budgets, and being a part of a couple of marketing roles, for all of them that I have handled, MarTech activities are more of enablers for, not for just acquisition. There is, I can't put a percentage of how much acquisition and how much retention, but they are more for retention, more than acquisition. But how the times are changing, and how even Nikhil, when he was talking about a one view where everything is coming together, a lot of budgeting has started happening for those activities, also for a performance basis. But again, going back to your question, which is budgeting, it stays between capex, which is once in a year, and then it's segregated because you've invested that money, and if you don't have a roadmap to spend money and to boost it, those activities will not gain you any result. Like back in the days, we used to have a ATL and a BTL, which still exist, but at least in this one, it is pure play capex, which is resting in upgrading the systems, and then you invest OPEX, and then you see the outcome in the next 3 years.
It's also related to, I think I'll encourage the moving the thought process from retention and acquisition to customer lifecycle. For an FMCG, acquisition makes more sense because it's a one-time use product. For a service provider, retention may make more sense. For hospitality, for example, guests coming in again and again will probably increase customer lifecycle. So I think the conversation needs to move from retention acquisition to customer lifecycle. I think all of us are moving towards that already.